Bucket lists used to be personal. Then some random list on social media says you haven't travelled unless you've been to these 10 places. We've outsourced our curiosity. Join me as Richard Limburg talks about this and more. Richard, welcome to the Nifty Travel Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
No, you're welcome. And the first thing I always like to ask my guests is about your earliest memories of travel.
Wow. We traveled with my parents a lot to the south of France. So I would say it's the stones in the beaches of Nice. That's probably one of my earliest memories because I used to collect them and then take them up to the apartment we rented for the summer, and I used to make roads for my cars to play with. So that's and I remember how hot they were, the stones, because obviously from the sun. So yeah, and plus we have tons of photos from there, so it might be also be generated from the photos, but I do have some memories from there for sure.
So do you think it gave you a hint about what you would eventually be interested in, or was that something that happened much later?
No, the travel as a career happened way later. Definitely, travel has always been there because I grew up both in London and Sweden before I started school, right? So, and we went to London a lot also after I started school, and France, like I said. So it's always been there, several trips a year. So it was kind of like a normal state. And as an adult, just continued through work and also, of course, personal. But I never thought about it as a career up until, well, it just happened basically, 2017, something like that.
So travel wasn't your first interest. You got into the tech world. So how did you end up choosing technology?
Well, it kind of chose me because I was studying business at university in Lund, south of Sweden. We have a big university there, and in the evenings I did telephone sales because I didn't really want to take any loans and stuff like that. So I wanted to be self-funded. So I did those telephone sales during the evening. And one evening I met a guy in the same room who was also doing sales, and he was talking about an idea he had for software for mobile phones. This is in the beginning of the 2000s. So pre-iPhone, pre-smartphone. And as a business student, I knew how to write business plans and stuff like that. That was, our bread and butter, so to say, to do. So we decided to try it out. I wrote the business plan. We wrote it together in a way, and he was developing the product. And so that was just like a fun thing to do. But we ended up winning a competition, business plan competition, and it kind of like snowballed from there. One thing, we won more competitions, and the product was really right for the time. It was a very exciting process, doing that whole tech scene that you read about for most tech companies now. We did that. It ended up, being invested from the US, and we had offices around the world and things, and sold it off for 5 years later. So I just stumbled into it. I didn't have any tech background, or I don't know how to code. So yeah, it just happened, but it was a hell of a trip.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you mentioned 2017. So travel in some respect raised its head. How did it make itself known to you?
Well, after I sold that tech business, I started working with sustainability, right? And I've done that in various forms. It's been nonprofit work, it's been sustainable finance. And in 2017, we had this idea for sustainability rating platform. So you would rate, as a traveler, you would rate hotels, restaurants, destinations, and attractions and stuff like that based on certain sustainability criteria that we had developed as a framework. And this was, of course, building on all the work I've done before, right? But just applying it into a new industry. And at that time, we'd done some research because we really wanted to use this kind of platform in an industry where we felt it could make a real impact, and the industry had to be big enough. And that's why we settled for travel, because it's one of the absolute biggest monsters out there, right, in terms of size. And so, yeah, we launched this platform, and it went quite well. A lot of people started rating hotels and restaurants, and we got quite a lot of media and stuff. Then fast forward to the first year of the pandemic, I saw the writing on the wall quite fast, because most of our potential clients, because we were getting into the monetization stage at that point, were having trouble staying afloat themselves. So, and with lots of people involved in the project, I didn't feel like this was going to end well. So we put it down, which was a shame. But that happened, and then I took a little bit of a break during the pandemic. Did different projects outside of the travel, and then got back into it with One Planet Journey in 2023.
So I suppose, in a sense, obviously the pandemic was disruptive for many people. Was one of the things that you saw was that people started wanting a different kind of travel to the way they used to do it?
Absolutely, and that was the case for myself and, well, my wife as well, right? So we actually, because we didn't have any lockdowns in Sweden, one thing to remember in this, and so we did a lot of domestic travel during these years, during the pandemic. And then once things started opening up, we did in 2022 and stretching into 2023 a longer road trip. So we took the car, drove from Stockholm down to Lisbon in Portugal, and so we did like a month there, then a month in Marbella, a month in Nice, a month in Amalfi, and visited and then drove through Eastern Europe back to Sweden. So that was five and a half months or something. And that journey was the birth of One Planet Journey. I didn't know it at the time while I was traveling, but after I came back and I started reflecting on how we traveled and how different it was from what I used to do, and specifically because we were gone during the low season or the off season, right? And it was such a revelation, because at first I thought, okay, we can't swim, blah, 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 it's going to be too cold. That was all BS. It was perfectly fine. I was swimming all over the place in each country. Hardly any people, no crowds, better deals in terms of money because it's much cheaper. Plus, we had such fantastic interactions with the locals because they were not, bombarded with all these tourist hordes. So we had much nicer conversations. We were also, because we were staying longer, we could, go to the local markets, shop for food, join the local gym, get your hair done, all these kind of things that integrates you more into the local life, so to say. And since then, we said this is the way we have to travel, right? And we don't want to, so we stay in Sweden now during the summer instead, which is the best time to be here. But yeah, so that was how it started, because once I got back from this trip, I started missing the travel industry, right, which I've been in before. And yeah, I started just putting two and two together. And I felt like other people would appreciate this form of travel as well. There's different names out there. I found this concept of deep travel and started developing it. But of course, you can call it different things, right? Purposeful, meaningful. I like the word deep because it's really signifies the type of travel we did.
So, having spent a long time out of Sweden, do you think that changed your perspective of Sweden in any way?
Well, you know how it is. You always miss your country most when you're not there. So and I love Sweden. There's so many great things about it, from the nature and all that kind of stuff also. So things I started appreciating, because I've lived abroad for longer times before the pandemic as well. So it wasn't new in that sense. I already knew what I like and miss about Sweden when I'm away. And which is, that everything works and stuff like that. It's very frictionless society in my mind. We're very advanced digitally and all that. So those things are certainly aspects you miss when you're not here. But also it's quite easy here. You just take the car, you drive, you don't have to stop every 5 minutes to pay and things. You just drive. It's very convenient. What was one aspect I thought about when driving through Europe? My God, you have to pay everywhere on the freeways. So we definitely have some luxury things here compared to other countries.
Yeah, it's the perspectives, though, isn't it? That I always find interesting. As a child, before I really got into, pushed into education as one does, it was all about the senses, and it's that I remembered, more than anything else. What home is like.
Definitely, and because I've had all these international experiences, both as a child and as an adult. Home has been different things at different times. But Sweden, of course, is the place I've been the most. So it's still like ground central for me. And I'm from the south of Sweden, so it's always been quite easy to get out fast also as well. Now I'm up in Stockholm, which is a bit further up, but it's we still have good communications too, so whenever you feel like it's getting too cold, like in the winter, or too dark, it's quite easy to get out.
Well, I always say to anybody from Scandinavia, the British in particular, we don't know anything about cold. So
no, it depends on your perspective on what you like. I from the south of Sweden, it's not very cold either. I mean, not compared to here in Stockholm or above. And the winters now, as you might have noticed yourself, with climate change, they're not what they used to be. So now, for example, today it's 8 degrees plus here in Stockholm. Hardly winter.
Yeah, it's quite mild, isn't it? Yeah. It's we get lots of rain now instead of snow.
Exactly.
So in terms of your discoveries then, your 5-month trip then really sort of made the experience-driven vacation package, if you like. It made it a lot clearer to you. So that led you to thinking, well, what shall I call it? It was meaningful. You like the word deep. So did it sort of open up other aspects of it that you thought, well, okay, that's where we start. Where do we go from here?
Exactly. I mean, once you think about it and what it means to travel that way, you had different ideas of what it could develop into as well. And before it was more questioning, where do I go, or where do we go, right? But this trip and now beyond, it's always why are we going is the questions that we're asking ourselves. So there's a deeper purpose behind it, following your interest, for example. So we travel much more now based on our special interest. It could be food, it could be culture. I'm very interested in history, for example. So Roman, Greek, Egyptian, whatever I go to, history is something I really, really like to get into. So we choose our locations based on our interest in a much more vivid way than before. And that's something we've connected to the concept of deep travel, that it's a lot about personal development as well as a key tenet of the whole concept. That I call it, to tie it into business, that you get a higher return on investment on your journeys, right? And I think that's important because we're spending a lot of money traveling, and you should. I mean, there's different trips for different phases in your life. Sometimes you just want to relax. Okay, you have your beach vacation. But most of the time, you can do so much more, is what I'm saying, with deep travel. And if you really think about it and being intentional about the trip itself, what do you want out of it once you're home? You can reflect on it, you can journal while you're there to help things along and getting new perspectives. It's also about taking the time to connect to the destination itself, learning about it and connecting with locals. We get the question a lot, do you have to spend a lot of time? No, because it helps, but you can be, like I said, intentional about it, and you can be very, like, following your interest. You can go to London, for example, and be culturally minded for 24 hours. You pick your destinations, your places, what you want to do, and just have a very immersive cultural experience in London in a day. So it's not necessary that you always have to stay like a month or more, but it depends on what you're after. But definitely, you have a much bigger chance of getting that slice of local life when you stay a bit longer.
Yes, of course. But it's interesting, though, isn't it, when what you were saying about being intentional, because if you think about the general travel, and I'm probably talking more pre-pandemic, somebody might say, well, where are we going to go? And people didn't really know where they were going very strongly, and didn't have very strong feelings about necessarily what they were going to do when they got there. It was essentially, we're traveling because we can. So are you seeing a change in the trends in that respect?
Yes, but I think the post-pandemic effect has worn off a bit, and I think it's back to more or less normal, the way I see it. And to touch upon a thing you said there about that we just used to go somewhere because we can, and I think it was actually worse than that, and it still is in a sense that people have this tendency to look at what others are doing. It's fueled by social media a lot, by these kind of bucket lists or whatever, top 10 lists or whatever you want to call them. And the bucket list used to be something that was personal to you, but now it's a generic kind of thing. Like, okay, you haven't traveled unless you've been to these 10 places, some list says on social media, and then you pick your spots based on that, but it's not really tied to you. You're just following a script, basically. And what we're saying is that write your own script, become the protagonist in your own story, so to say, and travel the way you want to the places that are important to you. And there's a shift in the industry, the way we see it, so that's connected to the trends. Yes, more people want to travel this way, the way I'm describing it. But it's definitely not the mainstream yet.
Yeah, perhaps a work in progress.
Yes.
Or perhaps some people don't know that they can. Do you think that's possible?
Well, of course. I mean, I didn't know so much about it myself until a few years ago. So it's because you just fall into these routines that you have, and okay, we should do another weekend trip. Okay, let's go down 2-3 weeks during the summer. It's the standard thing. And once you discover there is another world out there, I think what's driving it also is more and more people have less rigid work schedules, or they're a little bit more free. So that's beginning to boom, so to say, in the market in that sense, because there's more people being able to travel on a different time schedule than before.
Now, one thing I've seen that you've identified is that generally speaking, high net worth individuals tend to have more. They have more choices, perhaps more time flexibility, and you listed a number of categories in which they might determine they'd be interested in. And you mentioned some of them interested in food, culture, wellness. This new concept fairly new concept of slow travel. People like going on their own. Of course, digital nomads has been a thing for a little while now, Do you think they are even changing and adapting to what we thought of what they were, say 10 years ago?
Definitely. I mean, the digital nomad space is something we're following quite a bit and have partnerships in. And just as, the normal traveler, if we distinguish it like that, you can be different degrees of deep, let's say, in your, both as a person, but also in your choice of travel, right? And think about it as a spectrum. So just like normal travelers, digital nomads have also had a change where they're perhaps now not just interested in finding fast Wi-Fi, in a workspace, but actually taking time to understand and connect with the destination they're in, trying to learn something about it. And I mean, work is always the primary way of funding it, of course, so they have to work and have all those things, but it's not just that. So I think that sector is changing as much as general travel is. Just to touch upon this with luxury, luxury as a category is also going through a change in terms of what you define as luxury. It's not only the yachts and those things, but mindfulness, having actually time to, for personal development and those things are mattering much more. And we make a very strong point out of saying that deep travel doesn't have to be, it's not about your size of your wallet. It's not per se luxury travel. It can be, but it can also be budget travel, right? It depends, again, on the mindset of the traveler. And we have plenty of examples and articles about, street food or different terms of types of accommodation while you're traveling, like homestays and stuff like that, which can be as deep as anything else, right? Some of the best food I've had has been outside of the Michelin restaurants, for example. It's been simple street food. So again, up to each traveler to decide and see where they are, what they want out of their particular trip. Money can sometimes be a lubricant, but it's not always necessary.
Yeah. So do you think luxury can be sustainable?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the luxury sector in itself has been actually driving sustainability for some time now. Obviously, they have the money to spend because, for the technology behind it and efforts and campaigns around it. So yeah, definitely. And also, let's keep in mind also that sustainability is not only solar panels and nifty shower heads that reduce the flow. It's also the social side of things. And I think that part of sustainability has been held back before, which is also one of the reasons why it hasn't really taken off, right? Why hasn't sustainability really become a thing in the travel sector with travelers? It's talked about and people say they want to travel that way, but in reality they don't. And I think it's because it's been absolutely too heavily focused on things like carbon emissions, which are important, but it's not really appealing, and understandable in a way to normal traveler. But when you center it on the social side and the human aspect of travel and local situations and all those kind of things, it becomes much more tangible and relatable. And this is something we cover a lot as well. Sustainability, of course, is one aspect of deep travel as well.
Do you think one of the challenges around this is that we need to explain it more? You say that there are many assumptions, and do you think that's why, to coin a phrase, why people don't go deeper?
Well, of course, if you have to, it's like a joke, right? If you have to explain it, half of the fun is out of the room. So every time you have to explain something, of course, it's an extra step, right? And it will appeal to people that have, that tendency to think a bit more and be more reflective. And that's not always suited to wider masses or, even for myself, it's not like I'm like that all the time either. Sometimes I just want things to be done fast, and it depends on your situation. And I think because as things, I see deep travelers also as trendsetters, right? So and they're quite influencers in that sense. And when more people see the way you can travel and the benefits that come with it, I think it will grow. But again, it won't be the mass market, and I don't want it to be either, because there are certain benefits of traveling this way that are tied to this not being a mass market phenomenon.
That's interesting, that, isn't it? So this nicely segues into the idea of slow travel. I asked somebody the other day, great, but how slow do you have to go for it to be?
Well, we touched upon it a bit before. This with how much time do you have to spend in a specific place? Can you do it in 24 hours? And I said yes. Slow travel, again, we have that as an example of deep travel, and definitely it overlaps in a huge way with deep travel, of course, because you're more reflective, you're taking the time to connect. But deep travel itself is not obsessed with the pace. It's more the intention, as I said before, and the mindset of the traveler. But I've done slow travel myself on occasion, and we'll do it again. So we see it more as an example or an instance of, because we categorize who are the deep travelers. We say that the slow travelers are one subgroup of our bigger niche.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's certainly an element of it, isn't it? And one thing I was thinking about is, well, people are more interested in wellness these days, aren't they? I often think sometimes, we get so into the travel. We might be traveling with friends or even on our own, but you can have vulnerable moments, can't you, in travel? And I think sometimes it's as well to give people the tools, what to do when you're unexpectedly alone, and all the things that you would normally expect to be and are no longer, they're not immediately available. How do you see that sector developing beyond just, I don't know, meditation is the most common?
Well, the fact that you said vulnerable is a key here, because when you travel alone, and that's why we actually have the concept of solo travel as another niche to this, is that you develop those kind of tools that you mentioned, right? The self-confidence, how to solve problems that always arise when you travel, of course. So solo travel is a fantastic way to develop as a person, I think. So travel as education in a sense. And it goes into the wider sense of, wellness travel, which is, of course, booming. Wellness travel has been traditionally associated a lot with spas and yoga, and that still is. We do have articles on those subjects, especially yoga. But I think now with wellness and how it ties into deep travel, it's much more specific. So I'm preparing actually now our next newsletter and the trends for 2026. So we go quite deep into things on the wellness front. For example, I could take some that we mentioned last year, forest bathing and, stuff like stargazing and things like that. So much more specific. It doesn't always have to be that you have to sit around and be in your head. It can be much more tied into nature as well. I see wellness as an intricate part of deep travel, none the least because, like I said, it's all about personal development as well, these types of journeys, right? Things that make you feel good. I feel very good when I'm doing something I'm really, really interested in. And that general sense of positivity is wellness to me.
Some people, though, they like to use, they see wellness as simply disconnecting. Because we live with bricks in our in our pockets, don't we? And we feel obliged almost to overconnect.
Which is why I guess digital detox has been such a buzzword this year, if nothing else. We certainly talked about it. I've done it myself, especially when you're doing adventure travel and you go to remote places, climbing a mountain for 5 days or something, and there's no reception. I was just commenting actually on LinkedIn on somebody's post the other day that those moments is when I felt like the most alive, actually, because there's danger. There's a sense of adventure, and there's no lifeline. I can't call anybody if something happens. I might if I had a satellite phone, but I don't. So, but you get the point. So, those moments where things are really real, and you don't have that digital. I had the phone with me, but it is like a brick, right? I can take pictures with it, but even with that, I'm trying to be much more sensible than I used to before. I was just having the phone and just taking picture after picture. I try to keep it much more in my pocket nowadays when I'm also in the city or other places. And because I don't want to live my journey through the phone. I can check the pictures later if I take a few representative ones, but I definitely want to be present. And that's something, this about being present, there's very good literature about it as well. And it takes practice to actually be present. That's not something you can just switch on and off from one day to the next. It's taken me some time. I'm not fully there yet either, but it's something I'm improving on.
Yes, living in the moment, isn't it? It's something we can easily forget. And I was reminded of it watching somebody else's channel reviewing a new light metro in a city in I think it was Sydney, Australia, and he mentioned that 50% of the signs were actually on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that's where most of the people are looking, either at their phone or at the ground. And I thought, my God, that's quite shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the local council thought that was, an important thing, a place for messaging.
I always look at it from a point of view when you're driving, right? If you have your phone, you're going to have a serious problem. And when you're driving, you really have to be present and omnipresent, right? You almost have to anticipate what other people are doing as well. So that kind of presence when I'm driving and I'm really is what I want also when I'm walking around. So even now when I do my hourly walks every day, right? I try to leave the phone at home. Yeah. I want full sensory experience.
Yeah, absolutely right. A gentleman once said to me, "You should remember to look up." And you can get a lot, as you say, you can get a lot from an hour's walk every day.
Yeah, and especially like when you're taking the time, the money spent, and you're traveling somewhere new, right? Everything you look at is new, basically. If you're not present and you're just looking through your phone, I mean, you're just reducing your experience.
But it's interesting you say that. It's something that we do innately when we go to somewhere we have little knowledge of. We automatically are looking around, and but at the end of each day, we wonder why we're really exhausted, because we're not used to doing it when we're somewhere that's more familiar to us. We get into routines very easily.
But that brings me to another point though with deep travel is that it is with repeat travel. So I'm one of those people, like I like to go back to the same place a lot. So some of my favorite places I've been to like 30, 50 times maybe. And I still discover new things there. Just, it allows you to go deeper in such an amazing way once you go back in the second or third time compared to the first time. Because like you said, the first time you're just exhausted because everything is so new, right? And you might forget a lot about it as well because it's so much at the same time. But the repeat visits is which allows you to really go deep in my mind and really get to know the destinations that you're picking and going to.
Now that kind of circles back to the meaningfulness of a destination, and slightly to to the bucket list, because we have maybe we have an idea of what a destination might be. We get there and it doesn't really tick any of the boxes, and we think, well, that's interesting, but we never end up going there. But the most meaningful ones are the ones that you go back to frequently. There's always something new to see, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I take London as an example. I can't count how many times I've been there. I've lived there lots of years as well, but every time I go to London, it's like it feels like something new, right? Even if I'm walking down Oxford Street for the 1,000th time, something new to discover. So I really, yeah, I mean, if somebody told me I can never visit a new country ever again, it would be sad, but still, I'd be fine, because I'd go to my favorite places and still feel like it's a new thing.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that you obviously visited places and you've lived in places. When you started doing the living somewhere for any length of time, what about it changed it from a normal vacation?
I think friendships, definitely, because that's obviously something that takes a while to develop. And I don't mean friendships that end the time you go back, but actually still, I still have them here, and I contact them and see them when I go back. So, and that's a real luxury, friendships. And yeah, I mean, the chance to visit more of the country, because one of my things that I actually hate when people say is like they've gone to, let's say, a city for a weekend, or maybe a week in a country, and they say, check, I've done that or this city. I find that totally ridiculous, because how can you've done nothing, right? When you live in a country for a year or more or something, and you really take the time to travel throughout the country, something that sometimes we even neglect to do in our own home country, right? So I think that's important, to really see it all, or as much as you can at least, different places, not just focus on the big cities. Go to the rural areas, go to the nature, all of it, and get a sense of what the country is really like. And that's also a key thing, right, for sustainability as well, that choose alternative destinations. There's a popular phrase now with destination dupes, right? So don't just go to Paris, go to some of the other French cities as well. Although I'm going to Paris now for 2 weeks for Christmas and New Year's, but anyway, you get my point. So there's that kind of time is a luxury kind of thing when you were there for a longer time, to do those things that just aren't possible if you're there for a shorter period. I like to read a lot, for example. So I read before I go, I read during the time I'm there, I read after. And when you're there and you're reading at the same time, it's just totally different experience, because you can, that's that building that they mentioned in the book or whatever. So I'm a big fan of this kind of, like, it could be with movies as well, right? Set jetting, as it's called. But I prefer books. But anyway, same thing.
Yeah, no, I enjoy books. They're wonderful insights. Sometimes on other journeys, and as you say, you can check out their journeys in real time.
Yeah. I remember once when I was living in Cairo at the time, and I got some book tips, and there was this, I think it was an American journalist who wrote about Cairo from his perspective, and he said that in the book, that once he lived there for a certain time, he fell in love with the city, because it's quite chaotic from the outsider's point of view, right? Cairo, 20 million people and all that. And after my time there, I felt exactly the same as he did. I was doubtful, starting to read the book, that I would ever feel that way after the first week I was there. And now it's like, can't wait to go back and stay there for a longer period again. It's I usually go back quite a lot, but it's an absolutely mesmerizing city.
Do you think when you get to feel that way, it's almost like you're connecting with the rhythm of the city?
Yes, you do. And every city, like every person, is very unique, and they have their own flaws and benefits and all that. And I think that there's certain people that you gravitate towards, and there are certain cities that you gravitate towards, and certain cities that you don't like because they don't fit you as a person. I was skeptical going there because, as a Swede, of course, coming from here, the orderly stuff, and then you go into this absolute chaos. But it works. It's just chaos from the outside, and you have this view when you come in. But obviously, for people living there, it's a different experience. And once you're there, you actually see that it, how it functions. It's that the word chaos doesn't apply anymore. It's just a phrase. But yeah, I actually love the rhythm there.
When you described the chaos, it reminded me the first time I saw a city in Thailand. I stared at it with an absolute horror, thinking, how on earth am I going to survive here?
Yeah.
But actually, having stared at it for a few days, I strangely started to see patterns. And once I realized what the locals were doing, I felt more comfortable about, I don't know, crossing the street or...
the crossing the street is a classic, right? Because that's also, you just start observing first how the locals do it because you don't get killed. And then you try to, follow their footsteps literally. And then suddenly you're on your own and it works out and you're just like a local.
Yeah, no, it's certainly interesting, and I think it's one of the best things you can do as a traveler, isn't it? It's just to watch what everybody else is doing.
It's kind of like when you try to choose and be smart about how you choose a restaurant, right? If you see a lot of locals there and it's not tourist dominated, it says something, right? So it's at least that's how I try to pick restaurants.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talking about travel more generally, we've talked about the pre and the post pandemic and things kind of going back to a sort of normal. Do you think people are as loyal to brands as they used to be, or are people now willing to, I don't know, hop around more?
Well, I think it depends on your relationship with the particular brand. If it's like booking a hotel or taking a flight, I mean, there are those people that are very conscious about their clubs and their rewards and all those kind of memberships. But for those things, no, I don't think people are so loyal. It's like, what deal can you give me? Over the time's good, stuff like that. For example, if I'm going to a place, I'm not going to choose it just blindly because of the brand. I'm going to choose what fits me with the times and the price and those kind of things. So that's not so brand loyal. But when it's more, maybe you're choosing, I don't know, a tour company or something, or a type of tour or things like that, where it's more tied to how you are as a person. Do you want small groups or big groups? Do you want a private or in a big group? Things like that. Then you might have some preferred suppliers that guaranteed this fits me. I didn't have an awful experience. Let's stick to those. So yeah, no, I'm very illoyal as a consumer in general. So I have a very hard time seeing brand loyalty like crazy. And what I've understood from research either is that it's becoming more and more difficult also to keep customers loyal. So I don't think it's a big thing.
Yeah, there's certainly I suppose it's because there's more choice than ever.
Yeah, I mean, just look at it. I mean, how many choices you have if you're going to go stay in a luxury hotel in Istanbul? I mean, for example, there's tons of choices. You can try out different ones each time you go. Why would you stay always at the same one? I personally can't see it. But maybe I'm reading into it based on my own bias.
Well, I mean that's all going to be part of the parcel, isn't it? Our first reflections matter, don't they? Because you said it. You feel more relatable to one city to another, and then conversely.
Yeah, in that sense, yes. I mean, I'll say I'm more brand loyal to the destination than in the individual businesses in that case.
Yeah. So when it comes to choosing sustainable places to stay, you mentioned somewhere about green certificates. Do you think how much do you think the traveller cares whether a destination has all the certificates? How many testimonials there are? How much do you see that mattering?
How do I put this diplomatically? I mean, it's these certifications are, I guess, good to have, and sometimes a must-have for compliance, right? So more from a business point of view that you have to have them to satisfy certain demands. But from a traveler point of view, and I'm speaking broadly here, people say they want to travel. You've seen the yearly survey from Booking.com every year. It's the same high number, but the actual number of people that follow through is probably single digits, I think, once it's confirmed. And certifications, when we were dealing with the rating platform before, people don't look for them. Okay, it's not like I'm going to actively choose and sit and search. Let's see which hotels has this or that certification. They don't remember which certifications are, right? They're not. If we're talking brands, right? They're not brands in that sense for the traveler. So it might be something they see fleetingly while they're in the booking process. Okay, and then they're comparing a few different alternatives. If one has a certifications and the two very similar choices don't, okay, that might be something that tips the scale if they're interested in this type of thing. Otherwise, they don't even register it. So already there, you can see that the number is going to be quite low. There is a more awareness around sustainability. But again, like I said before, it's been heavily tilted towards environmental factors. And that's simply not easy to connect to as a traveler. And the social sides of it have been neglected, but they're coming along now, like fair wages and stuff like that. Is something that people are quite interested in, but it's very difficult to understand if it's actually being implemented, right? How do you know how much the person, the reception is getting paid, if it's a fair wage? It's too much information to be able to process as a traveler. And that's why I think people are interested in it, but it's not an active choice. And yeah, and then of course there's the trust issue, right? There's a lot of certifications. Are all of them valid? We've had the green claims debate in the European Union, which has been watered down a bit as well, because it's very difficult. I think that explains some of the situation. There's the greenwashing aspect, of course, which has also led to a trust deficit. So yeah, no, I'm not a big believer in the certification as a driver for, as a market driver. No.
Yeah, and as you say, it's the measurement, isn't it? If you can't measure it, you can't really take it into account.
No, and not my point and the company's point, and this is something we argue strongly for in all our discussions about sustainability, is like this type of thing needs to be default, right? The industry needs to lead the way. Every hotel, every restaurant, whatever, need to have these things in place, but don't ask the traveler to be driving this. You got to have all those things in place. So it's a default choice. Whatever hotel I choose, it has to have some kind of green level or whatever we want to call it, right? Because otherwise it's going to take 200 years before people are fully aware of these things. This is never going to happen, basically. So the industry has to lead the way. And of course, then there has to be government pressure of some kind as well to further it along. Yeah, so make it default. That's my takeaway from this.
Yeah, good idea. So in terms of nature, nature very important. I think one of the lessons perhaps is that people who live in cities are less connected to their past than ever before. So, but nature remains something that a lot of travellers want to see, the nature they don't normally see. Now, there are various levels of access, and I saw you ask an interesting question in one of your posts about whether access to nature should have a dollar amount on it.
Yeah.
So what sort of responses did you get, and why did you ask the question?
Well, first of all, the responses were very divided, I would say. There's a lot of strong opinions in either direction. Of course, always some people in the middle. The reason I asked this, because we've had a debate in Sweden as well, because here everything is free. It's all accessible, which is great. But as more and more people get into this type of thing, because they, like you said, they're interested in experiencing nature and all that, and we have fantastic nature here in Sweden. But when more and more people that are not really used to, that type of experience and knowing how to behave and what to bring, and not causing the emergency services to helicopter in every 5 minutes to rescue them, which is happening here way too frequently. And then there are also the crowds are disturbing animal migration patterns, like with the reindeer up north and things. The question needs to be asked, right? And it has been asked. And should they've actually tried to close off certain areas during parts of the year for it to regenerate. And then we've seen I think it was the reason why I asked was because the US had a proposal out to charge international visitors, was it $100 or something like that, to visit national parks. It was just out a few weeks ago. And it's problematic in one sense for accessibility, of course. Why should everything be so expensive? But then again, the tragedy of the commons, right? So if we destroy it, then there won't be anything left for anyone to see. So is it better than maybe to close it off a bit and let it at least have some kind of carrying capacity that we follow? And I think it's a very difficult question, but I'm leaning more towards having some kind of restriction. Even if you don't want to charge, but at least restrict the number then, which, depending on the size of the area, can be difficult to implement, but at least try to implement the numbers. Just like, when you go to a place like Venice, if we talk non-nature stuff here, but still, there is a limit to how many people you can go there, because then the experience deteriorates for everyone. And it's the same in certain nature reserves and national parks. It's not a place you want to go and have to elbow your way forward. So I'm leaning towards some kind of restriction / fee.
Yeah. But do you think when it comes to national parks, a lot of countries are blessed with many parks? Yet I've had people talk to me and say, well, we've got all these parks, but everybody goes to the same 2 or 3. Therefore, it really boils down to the management overall.
Yeah, which is true in a very big way when we talk about over-tourism, right? Is it actually a problem of everyone going to the same place, or is it because yes, but it's a management issue, right? They also market it themselves. They think volume, and then they're surprised when people are coming. Locals get pissed, and then we have this vicious circle, right? But there are so many ways you can do this. Like we talked about before, promote alternative destinations, even within the city, right? It's very restricted to a certain number of areas where people tend to gravitate. So they can make efforts within the city, within the country, to push people out to different places and start marketing them. Then you have the seasonality aspect, of course, which we also mentioned. Try to balance that a bit better, not having everyone come during the peak periods. So management issues, and then you can also, I guess, involve technology to some extent, right? Try to control the flow, the actual flows in more of a real time, and have some kind of map showing, now it's red, don't go there. So there's a host of things you can do before you get all draconian and start shutting things down or banning. I don't like the word bans, right? And we've seen some cities now try to do that with, for example, short-term rentals, which I'm totally against, because it's always easier to just go to draconian measures and say ban, instead of trying to actually address it with those things that you actually can do. So it's a management issue.
Yeah, but it's interesting what you're saying about there are alternatives even within certain locations that are not being taken into consideration. I've been in busy cities, and it never ceases to surprise me that you see the majority of the people going down the same old streets, and I've gone off a side street, not because it was dangerous, but ended up somewhere where there was virtually no one, and sometimes there is no one but me. Yeah, I'm pinching myself. Am I really in the same place?
It's I have the same experience, and that's why in our articles we don't do it in every article, but a lot of the time we try to highlight different places. Of course, then you have the question, okay, but if you're highlighting it, won't that also then get crowded? But again, we're not a mass market phenomenon, so I don't think we run that risk yet, at least. But we've had fantastic people also, contribute advice, and we've interviewed authors that are writing about cities and highlighting completely. There was one, for example, from Istanbul. She called it 50 unsung places in Istanbul. Fantastic city, by the way, and it's the type of place where you can literally spend indefinite time and just find new things, right? So it's about, again, the mindset. Are you curious? Do you want to see different things, or do you want to see the same thing as everyone else? I understand if you've never seen the Blue Mosque or Hagia Sophia, of course, go there. You have to see it, but there's more, right? So don't just hang around there.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned this phenomenon called coolcations. A lady spoke to me about a place in Italy, and she said, I couldn't understand why suddenly this quiet village where no one ever went to suddenly had buses and coaches all coming in. And she said, well, and somebody said, oh, it was a post on such and such a social media channel. And then everybody wanted their picture taken there. But she said, well, it wasn't so much that everybody suddenly wanted to go there. It was the fact that because it was such a quiet place, it couldn't cope with a surge. So do you think part of the persuasive process of saying, oh, you don't always have to go to Venice or Barcelona during peak time, don't you also have to be careful to recommend alternatives that can cope with changing travel patterns?
Absolutely, and so Scandinavia, for example, has been labeled as a coolcation destination, and as more and more countries in the Mediterranean become too hot at certain periods. And I think the tourist authorities here would welcome more tourists, but because things here are much smaller in scale, and we don't have the infrastructure in place in certain of the very cute places we have around the coasts and inland as well. Yeah, they can't. I mean, there's been examples already, for example, in Norway, where the roads are totally clogged with these big camper vans and stuff. You can't move, right? And then there's not enough toilets and the whole thing. So it's already happening in that sense. And what I can say there is, yes, as a magazine and influencers of some kind, we have to be careful, but we don't know 100% what kind of capacity a destination can handle. The destinations themselves have to be quite active here as well and say, okay, be responsible in their own marketing. You want tourists? Fine. How many? And direct it towards the right type of tourist then. Because that's a larger debate around any destination right now as well, right? Who is the right tourist? Quality tourism, as we call it. We actually say deep travel is a solution to this, but right, don't try to attract everyone. What is your destination profile? Match it with the type of traveler you want and target them, and don't try to be everything for everyone. Same thing applies here now when we're trying to get more people to discover the cooler climates. Learn from the mistakes of some of the hotspots, and you're going to be active. You can't just sit around and use the old models for tourism that have worked in the past, but it's obviously well past their due date.
Yeah. Now, as part of your magazine, you just mentioned, you have many contributors, writers. How important is, the diversity of contributors, would you say?
Well, super important, because, if we're going to get those kind of perspectives that we're talking about, why would you find an article on One Planet Journey inspirational? For example, now we have one published yesterday about Birmingham, let's say, right? So it's written by somebody that actually lives there and has grown up there, born there probably as well. Imagine if I wrote it. I've been there once, right? So there has to be diversity is like inbuilt into this. If we're going to have somebody write about a city in the south of Italy, I prefer if at least one of the articles has to have a local perspective. Now, it's also interesting to read, like, let's say you went down to, let's say, Napoli, and I want your perspective. That's also interesting, but we should at least try to get local perspectives in as much as possible. Now, we're not by any means done. We don't have total coverage, and we accept articles, of course, but they have to have a standard as well, right? So we don't have everything in place yet. I can't promise that you will find a local perspective of any city you're searching for, but that is our aim, and we've made concerted efforts to reach people from different countries to write about their own places as well in our marketing. It's not always possible, but it's something we try.
So how do you think things are developing in travel writing? Because a lot of people now consume a lot more video content. How does the travel writing stay relevant, do you think?
Again, here it depends on the consumer. I like text, right? I watch videos as well, but when we attended the ITB conference in Berlin earlier this year, it was actually this year, Google had some really interesting research about how much time people spend researching one single trip. And they start almost, what was it, like four months or something before they actually go away. And they spend on average 303 minutes researching their trip. So as you can imagine, consuming video is not the only type of research they do. It's a mix. Blogs for inspiration, perhaps even before they decided where they're going actually, but they're more in the dream stage. And that's where we are. We consider ourselves to be in the dream stage when people are looking for inspiration. That's our niche. So people use a mix of things. We see our traffic growing, so obviously there must be some interest still in reading text. If we branch out and do videos in the future, perhaps, but we'll see. Our goal has never to be, to reach everyone. The deep traveler, I think, or I know, they're the type of people also that like to read as maybe their first choice before they go to, and they will use video and images or social media as a backup or something like that. But at least the written word is a priority for them.
And is storytelling an important part of this?
Yeah, of course. You can have any type of local or fantastic, pictures or whatever, but if the story isn't there, it's not going to be inspiring at all. So, and that's why in our guidelines we always say, what's the story? Where's the sensory descriptions? What's your personal reflection? Because that's another thing here. The articles have to convey personality, right? Don't just say, "Oh, this neighborhood was amazing." Why? Why was it amazing for you? What is it in you that connected with this particular place or this street food you ate or whatever, right? So I want to hear those things, because with AI now, everything is so generic and flowery and descriptions. So if you're gonna, I could populate the whole magazine with AI written content. It would be awful, right? But it's definitely possible. But we want unique content with personal reflections, and that can't be replicated. It has to be a lived-in experience. We would never publish an article about some place that the author hasn't been. There's no research articles here. It has to be they've been there, they've taken the pictures themselves to a large extent. Sometimes we have to compliment, but that's uncompromising on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. Good approach. So I thought I'd maybe ask some sort of quick fire sort of questions. Quantity or quality?
I think you know the answer to that one. Quality, 100%.
Can you travel too much?
Yes, I think so. Because I was just having this discussion with my wife yesterday when we were walking. I said to her, I love to travel, but sometimes I feel it gets into the way of my routines, right? Like your workout at the gym, or the way nutrition and food and eating the right things and stuff like that. You know how travel is. It's quite disruptive. You want to have a good time when you're out there, and it cuts into the good habits that you've kind of established. So when you stay away longer, it's easier to get back into the good habits. But when you're doing shorter and a lot of travel, it's totally disruptive.
Well, give you a little bit of context as why I asked is that I followed a couple of YouTubers who are just obsessed by going, they've gone to over 100 countries, and the consequences of it is they don't know where they're from. Well, they do know where they're from, but they no longer feel connected to anywhere. And I thought that was quite an extraordinary outcome for what was meant to be an incredible set of journeys.
Yeah. People ask me a lot about how many countries I've been to, and as I mentioned to you before, I think the question is ridiculous because you haven't really seen the country just because you've been there for a week. Speaking about this, where you feel connection, I can't say too much since I want it to be a new experience, but one of the trends that we're talking about in our upcoming newsletter for 2026 is actually about finding your roots while you travel.
Yeah. I often think that a good tip, I don't know if you agree, is if you're going somewhere totally new and you're not sure how you feel, take something familiar with you as almost like a backup plan, or it's a bit like wearing a different set of clothes, but you're sort of protecting yourself mentally as well as being curious.
Yeah, I along those lines, I usually tell people to journal, write down reflections at the end of the day. I do that every day at home as well, but I find that quite stimulating.
Yeah. So, what's more important, do you think, the journey or the destination?
I mean, it's so difficult because the way we describe and think about deep travel, where we ask the why is more important than the where, right? So, but the why is not equated to the journey per se, unless you count the journey as your entire experience while you're at the destination. In that sense, I would say the journey. But otherwise, for me, it's, I like to get there and then do the things I want to do while I'm there. So I don't romanticize the actual transport. If we call, I will say transport instead of journey. I don't romanticize that, unless you're going on Trans-Siberia. Maybe then I haven't done that myself, but I'm a more proponent of a road trip, if anything. But even then, I just want to get there.
Yeah. Oh, but it only shows that everybody likes traveling in a different way.
Yeah.
So when you reach your destination, do you look at it from a planning perspective or more spontaneous?
Well, I used to be a planner into the minute, detailed by the minute almost, and there's still that part of me is there. I try to plan in spontaneity, if that makes sense. So leave some spaces open. I try to accommodate, of course, the interests of my wife as well when we travel. So it's not just my things that we do. So I've become much more flexible and less rigid than I was before. Because especially when I was going to a new place, and we were touching upon that before, I went mental, right? I had to see the works, and I'm not like that anymore now. I feel less stressed about it.
Yes. Well, we evolve, don't we? We compartmentalize the places we visit.
Yeah.
So, are there any countries that intrigue you that you haven't been to yet?
Oh yeah, because I'm a desert lover. I guess from my time in Egypt, there is one country that I have like very high ambition to travel to when the time is right, and that's Namibia, Skeleton Coast there, because as for me at least, very hard to top in terms of beauty when I see the pictures. So, and I've heard also first-hand experiences from people who have been there about their experiences. So that's definitely something I really, really want to see. And in Europe, I can say I've covered pretty well. So otherwise, that is my favorite continent easily. What else? Yeah, I haven't been to Machu Picchu, and that's also because I love that type of climb and adventure to get there. So that's something. It's not about the actual destination so much; it's more up to get there in that sense. So yeah, those two would be very high on the list. My personal list, not a bucket list.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking of Sweden. What unusual travel thing would you recommend to someone who's never been to Sweden?
Well, I mean, if you come to Sweden, you probably have some kind of interest in nature because we have that in abundance. We have fantastic beaches from the part of Sweden where I'm from. So if you come in the summer, it's very nice, fantastic, cute sea fishing villages and all that. But if you want a little bit more hardcore adventure, you have to go north. And for example, now I'm in Stockholm, right? So, but there's another, let's say 1,200 kilometers before the Swedish border ends of fantastic nature, forests as deep as you can imagine, and mountains as well. We don't have the highest mountains. Norway has higher mountains, but they're quite challenging, some of them to climb. And if you want to go in the winter, you can do it with skis, right? You ski a lot there, but I've done a lot of mountain climbing there in the summer periods, and you stay away like for 5-6 days, maybe hiking 30 kilometers a day. You stay in cabins or in tents. So I would definitely recommend going up north, maybe even above the Arctic Circle, that kind of north. If you like to stay in the summer, I have to say the Stockholm archipelago is something you should take. Don't do one island and say you've done it, take a few days and island hop. There's good ferry alternatives, because they're, for me, are really, really unique. I mean, other countries have islands as well, but trust me, when you see these ones, you'll understand what I mean. They're very different.
And there's accommodation on a lot of these islands, are there?
Yeah, some of the biggest ones, definitely, they have these kind of. Some might even have a little bit fancier, but definitely you have basic accommodation on some of the bigger ones and half big. But yeah, it's a fantastic transport network as well with the boats, so you can see a lot in a few days. Unless you can paddle also, of course, or if you want a real adventure like that.
Well, that's a different way of traveling around, isn't it? Either by ferries or perhaps kayaking in the right conditions. Yeah.
Yeah, so, we have a lot of things to offer here in terms of, let's say, tranquility-based travel.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of countries have hidden gems? It sometimes feels to me like it's an overused phrase. But when I think of my own country, I talk to other people, it's like they're everywhere, aren't they?
I mean, it is a bit of an overused phrase. Some people hate it already. We're guilty of using it, hidden gem. I mean, sometimes in our articles, but I'm not one for nitpicking on words. If the word works, I use it. And if that's what people are used to Googling, then we will use it so people can find our articles. It's that easy. About the concept itself, yeah, of course, a lot of countries have it, depending on, when you say hidden, to whom? The locals or outsiders, for example. So in the UK, I mean, when I lived there, I traveled all around England mostly, but I mean, the Lake District is one of my favorite places on earth. I don't know how many international tourists go there. I don't have the numbers, so you can correct me. Cotswolds and all these. I know it's popular with you guys yourself domestically, right, to travel there, as it should be. But I didn't see many international people while I was out there traveling. And I think a lot of people just equate London with the UK and that's it. And there's so much more. So I would say UK is just filled to the brim with hidden gems in that sense. I guess it depends on your definition of what's hidden or not. But
well, that's exactly it. I sometimes feel that destinations don't necessarily, what they advertise or say is possible doesn't always reach the potential customers. So I guess it's a marketing exercise.
Yeah, and again, I think it depends on who are you trying to target. All right, so if you ask deep travelers, for example, I'm certain 80 to 90% of them would know about Lake District, for example. But if you ask every traveler in the world, and so the percentage would be way lower. So in that sense, it could be a hidden gem for them. But
yeah. So in terms of the travel industry generally, what direction are we going in? Where do you think where are the next changes we should be looking out for, particularly in the sustainability sphere? And what would you like to see?
Well, I definitely like to see more people thinking about travel in the way we've been talking about for this hour, for their own sake, if nothing else. It has tremendous benefits also for the destinations and all others, but for their own sake, because you get so much more out of it. So that's something I want to see grow. With that, you have a lot of sustainability factors covered, because it is quality tourism we're talking about here. Like we discussed, going to different places, even within the city, but also in the country, during different seasons to alleviate the pressure. Being respectful, because that's something we didn't really talk about, but a key aspect, I think, for deep travelers is the respect for the places they visit. So you won't have these kind of bad headlines that you see a lot of the time. And why this is so attractive for destinations to attract this type of traveler. Of course, if you look outside of deep travel, what I see, and I think everybody sees, based on also what we saw at WTM and other big conferences, and is like AI. How big of a change it's going to have. And I'm not just talking about content now, for example. That's an easy thing to anticipate, but how will it affect the booking process? Where most of the money lies in the travel sector is with the OTAs. Will the chatbots, step inside and get the bookings already there before you start searching the OTAs? Will they lose some of their dominance? I think they've been king of the hill for quite a long time, and now is potentially a disruptive time for them. We'll see. The jury's still out. They might still win. So that's something I'm very interested in seeing how that develops. And then, there's the world is a tricky place with conflicts and all these kind of things. I'm also very interested to see what countries are the winners, out of this landscape that we're in. Climate change, and that also affects travel patterns, like we discussed with co-locations. I think the jury is still out in so many of these things that a lot of the predictions that we always see and read are purely guesswork and not necessarily the truth in any way. But for me, the most important thing is focusing on the traveler and making sure they maximize their experience, because I think when you do that, when you're mindful and intentional about your travel, so many of the ugly things with travel will dissipate, because you get a better type of traveler, because you develop as a person, and you, like I said, with the respect and all those kind of things that come with it. That's my take.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right that in a year's time, the landscape could be completely different again, couldn't it?
Who predicted AI that it came in that, what was it, 2022, 23, and how fast it's developed? Nobody is going to say, back in 22 that they knew how it was going to look today. So, and AI is developing exponentially, not linearly. So obviously it's very hard to say. I don't think the people that are actually developing the technology know that much themselves in terms of that.
Yeah, but the one thing that we know is really important, which you touched on, around respect and getting the experience and the perspectives, that's never going to get old. The more people we can collectively encourage to travel, then it, I always hope that, the more that travel, the greater perspective people get. It lowers the pressure in many places.
I think one thing we're seeing is that also a lot of destinations, or I say destinations, I should say locals, resident communities, have had enough, and that's what we're seeing with protests and general dissatisfaction, and that their voices are actually being heard much more than before, and that's affecting a lot of things. It's affecting how we write. It's affecting also about the big players and what they're marketing and how the destinations, they will eventually also have to change their marketing style. So I think this factor is going to have a tremendous effect on destination choices and, again, who they're trying to target. So I don't, if there's one thing I'm more certain of than the other things we discussed, is that this will affect the travel industry in a big way, because it's unavoidable. It's unsustainable in the way it's been.
Well, it's good that they feel that they need a voice, doesn't it? Because it's going to having a voice is going to have a more positive effect, and it's going to possibly attract the people who are looking for something different.
Yeah, I think it's so relatable as well, because I mean, how would you feel if your particular neighborhood was overrun and you couldn't take the bus, or and everything was a mess in your everyday life? Something we can all relate to. And if we go somewhere, we don't want to mess it up for the people that are actually living there. It's not something we really thought about that much before, but now it is an issue and it's being discussed, and certainly by us a lot as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I really, it's affecting like everything we do.
Well, let's make sure we all talk about it more, and we get those messages out. Well, Richard, it's been absolutely fabulous having a chat to you about travel. We could have covered a lot more, and we could have gone into a lot more detail than we had time for today. But thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come and have a chat with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for covering so much ground that you did, because it was a very all-encompassing conversation, I thought. So thanks.
No, you're welcome.